Hello and welcome on the Quint Bloomberg Quint and Hindi Quint. Joining us this evening is India's former Finance Minister, Mr. P Chidambaram, to discuss the GDP number and the economic destruction and how to get out of it. Thank you for your time, sir. Going by the latest GDP data, 24% downwards. Why do you think this has happened? Every country has faced this situation in pandemic. What is so unique, and why are you blaming the government of India for the mismanagement?
No one is blaming the government for the pandemic. We are blaming the government for the management of the pandemic. The pandemic is a worldwide phenomenon. Every country has been affected. But among the large economies, the worst affected is the United States. The second worst affected is India. Other large economies like China, Japan, Germany, France, UK, in the top 7 or 8, have been able to contain the damage to a single-digit number. I think only one of them has a double-digit number. Now, 23.9% in a country which already has a low per capita income and which already has close to 35, maybe 40% below poverty, is a massive blow. See, say for example, you take a country like Japan. Even if their economy fell by 10 or 15%, the people of that country have not become so poor that they go below the poverty line. They will become poorer relatively, but since their per capita is already so high, you can't classify them as poor people. In India, a 23.9% fall in output means that millions of people just above the poverty line have been pushed below the poverty line.
If you go back to 1997 and 2008, India has seen what a radical, bold economic revival package looks like. You have been a part of that whole exercise. Taking cue from that, what would you advise to this government? Can we go for a big GST cut of 8 percentage point for next 6 months? Can we go for 100 to 200 BPS cut in repo rate and push for loans to buy houses and cars?
See, merely a rate cut will not help. People must have money to consume, money to buy things. There has to be money in people's hands. I have done some analysis. 24% fall in output means a corresponding fall in jobs which produce that output. Say, even a 10, 12, 15% fall in number of jobs means a corresponding fall in incomes. A fall of, say, 15, 20% in incomes means that so many families have become suddenly poor. Therefore, you have to put money in the hands of the people so that they can start buying, start consuming. Consumption accounts for 60% of India's economy in normal times. Now, if consumption falls drastically, rate cuts won't help. So the first thing to do, and we had recommended it many, many months ago, I had said it, my party had said it, Mr. Rahul Gandhi had said it, I had jointly authored a paper and published it, put money in the hands of the people. People like Dr. Raghuram Rajan and Dr. Arvind Subramaniam recommended the same thing. Put money in the hands of the people. Whether you want to put 5,000 rupees or 7,500 rupees can be discussed. But put money in the hands of the people. That's the first thing to do.
Government doesn't have money and you have advised to borrow or monetize. So should the government go for, say, 10 lakh crore monetization of its deficit, or it goes for 30 years long-term bond listed in Chicago Stock Exchange for 30 years, and it could be $10 billion to $20 billion bond?
Government does not have money is a myth. How did government give a huge bonanza to the corporate sector by cutting the corporate tax rate. Except the corporates who demanded that, which economists advised that. Only the corporates wanted a cut in corporate tax rate. Corporate tax rates in India can be lowered, but this is not the time to lower it. So government had money, it gave away, I think something like $1.7 billion, isn't it? Or something like that, to corporates as a corporate tax cut. Secondly, a couple of days ago, I read that IMF, World Bank, ADB are willing to give up to $6.5 billion to the government for pandemic-related activities. Now, government had budgeted in the last budget only about 1.9 or $2 billion. So you're getting a bonanza of another $4.5 billion. Use it. Putting money in the hands of poor people who have lost incomes is a pandemic-related activity. And thirdly, what about the massive increase in petrol and diesel prices that they effected over the last 12, 15 months? Every calculation shows that they must have made a huge amount of money by way of increase in taxes on petrol and diesel and surcharges. Now, where is that money? So why don't you use all that money? Question is not that you have no money. You don't know how to prioritize the use of the money.
So how can one make this government understand and make the ideas palatable for it that printing cash at this point in time is a doable thing and they should not have any apprehension in doing so?
See, monetizing is a power given to the sovereign. Why does the sovereign have that power? If the theory says you should never exercise that power, then why have that power at all? So the fact that the sovereign alone has the power, state governments don't have the power, no one else has the power, only the sovereign has. So that power must be exercised sometime or other. Some half-baked economist tells them monetizing is a bad idea. I agree, in normal times, monetizing is not a good idea. And we're not suggesting monetize straight away. You monetize only that part of the deficit, that part of the borrowing, which you feel has reached a limit which makes you uncomfortable, which threatens the financial stability of the system. But that's some distance away. You should borrow and spend and transfer cash to the poor. That's the way to go about it. All other things can follow in a sequence, but the first thing to do is to borrow, spend, and transfer money to the poor.
And how should one spend? Government has huge food stock. There should be a massive push to that. It should go for massive public works and it should go for rural infrastructure building. And for that, they require money. Why are they not getting it?
Because they don't have imagination. We said, give every family 25 kilograms of wheat or rice every month for the next few months. Now they gave 5 kilograms per person. Now they are left with huge stocks of food grain. They said, we're going to give food grain to the migrant. You saw the report today. Only 33% of the migrants got that food grain. See, once you begin a targeted distribution, there will always be loopholes. You will get it, I will not get it. That's why we say make it universal. Doesn't really matter. You say everyone, from say Ratan Tata to the poorest man, will get 25 kilograms per family free food grain. Now Ratan Tata will not send his man to collect the food grain. The poor man will send him and collect it. But at least nobody will be left out. No? You don't have to get Aadhaar, you don't have to get this, you don't have to get that, you don't have to get some certification. Make it universal. If you make relief universal, everybody who's eligible is more likely to get it than making relief targeted.
Again, I'm coming back to this long-term dollar bond issue. Why there is a hesitation? Because there was some chatter that government is considering it.
So that was in the budget time, but I never thought it was a great idea. You see, whatever money government wants to raise can raise within India. See, when we were in government, we had considered floating these bonds abroad, but there are a lot of conditionalities. I can't remember every one of them now. But one day, Dr. Raghuram Rajan sat with me and explained all the conditionalities that have to be fulfilled before we can float a bond in the overseas market. He was our appointment to negotiate with the bond markets. And he came back and said, these conditionalities are very difficult to fulfill now. So we gave up that idea. It was explored, it was given up. There is enough money within the country. Whatever money government wants to raise can be raised by borrowing within the country. There is enough money, enough people with surplus cash who can put the money in government bonds.
Will that include strategic sale also? Because they have been talking about disinvestment, they have a target, but still we don't see Air India or Concor or BPCL going for strategic sale.
See, for every sale, you must have a buyer. No? Why would anybody buy an airline today unless you give it to him for 1 rupee? If you had the money, would you buy an airline today? When the airline industry is in doldrums, 60% of your aircraft are grounded, 60% of your seats are going vacant. Why would you invest in an airline today? So Air India should have been sold 2 years ago or 3 years ago if you wanted to sell that. You didn't sell that, you couldn't sell that because you had a very rusty machinery to implement it. I remember Mr. Jayant Sinha, then MOS Finance, and then who moved to civil aviation, told me that by 31st of March this year, I'm going to sell Air India. I said, good luck to him. I told him, good luck. Now, he didn't sell Air India. And all that happened is he lost his ministership.
Don't you think there are other companies that can still be sold in this kind of crisis situation? There are enough entrepreneurs to work for the country?
Market you are in. Depends on which market. For example, a telecom company cannot be sold today. It's possible you can sell a coal company, but coal is getting into a deeper and deeper mess. You can't sell an airline today. It's very difficult to sell an airline today. You can sell an airport, but even then the buyer there wants 6 months' time to pay up the upfront money. So some industries are in very deep distress. You cannot sell your PSU in that industry. But some industries are doing well, likely to do well. You can sell your PSUs in that industry.
And what about GST issue? This is one of those regular issues, or this becomes a big turning point in the way economic governance happens in this country?
It is. It is a big turning point because it reveals that the bond of trust between the center and the states has been broken by the unilateral action of the center. See, I implemented VAT with effect from 1st of January 2005. It is based on trust that I will compensate you, go ahead and implement VAT. In the first round, the 6 states would not agree, including Uttar Pradesh, Chief Minister Mulayam Singh Yadav, Tamil Nadu, Chief Minister Mr. Karunanidhi. But they came around in about 6 to 9 months. A bond of trust is important. In GST, I had promised, and Mr. Arun Jaitley committed in writing that for 5 years, if there is a shortfall of revenue from the target of 14% growth, the center will compensate the difference. That is bridging the difference, for which he was given the power to levy a cess. It's not as though it's coming out of central government revenues. It's coming out of the people of India. So that bond of trust was broken by the government when the finance minister, Ms. Sitaraman, told the GST Council, and earlier the finance secretary told the Standing Committee on Finance, we have no money to pay and we don't have to pay. Our Attorney General has told us that there is no obligation to pay. What rubbish is that? You have a legal obligation under Section 18. You have a moral obligation by the word given by the finance minister, recorded in the minutes, that any shortfall will be compensated. Now I think they're coming around to the principle that yes, it has to be compensated. Now they're debating who will borrow the money. I mean, I thought this is a no-brainer. This is a complete no-brainer. The only one who can borrow the money today is the central government. No state government can borrow. They've already reached the limit of 3% of FRBM. Many have already reached the relaxed limit of 3.5%. So where is the space to borrow?
So you are indicating that they are coming around to the view that it is government, central government's obligation that they have to compensate. And then the second question is who will borrow? So will they really take that as their responsibility, because they are saying they are using the act of God clause.
If God is going to decide your economic decisions, well, vacate. Let God take over. Why are you there then? What is this blaming the gods? In
So you
fact,
think
God has
consensus?
been kind to India. God has been kind by blessing the farmers. Even during a pandemic year, God has been kind by giving 10% excess rainfall. God has been kind by increasing the acreage sown with paddy and millets, etc. So God has been very kind. Don't blame God now.
Sir, some people wear tinted glasses, green with green tint, and they see lots of green shoots. Currently, some of the players belonging to the economic governance establishment, in this deep destruction, in this deep hole of contraction, they are talking about green shoot and throwing some numbers at it, numbers at us. What do you say to them?
They've been seeing green shoots for the last several months. The chief economic advisor has been talking about a V-shaped recovery for nearly 12 months. Just because you repeat these mantras, green shoots, V-shaped recovery, it doesn't happen. It's not pulling a rabbit out of a hat. On the ground, Ms. Sitaraman and Dr. K.V. Subramanian must come down on the ground, walk on the streets of the villages of India, walk on the streets of the small towns of India. They will find how the shops are shut. There are no customers for clothing and footwear. Simply no customers for clothing and footwear. No customers at restaurants and eating places. Now, this is the state of affairs. And you say, I see green shoots. Where do you see green shoots? Where do you see a V-shaped recovery? We have not even touched the bottom. Even for a V-shaped recovery, you have to go down to the bottom before you can rise. We have not touched the bottom. In fact, the warning has been, RBI's annual report warns that this pandemic effect on the Indian economy is more than the 1930 global recession plus the 2008 global financial crisis put together. Now, even after the RBI warns you, if you want to see green shoots, well, go ahead and see green shoots. All that we see is a desert.
Before I ask my last question, I want to go back to GST for a second. I'm getting indication from you that there will not be a big debate now, and somehow the consensus will be there. There will be an amicable solution.
No, all the non-BJP chief ministers have taken a line. Punjab, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Telangana, Chhattisgarh, Puducherry, Rajasthan have all taken a line. It's only the BJP chief ministers who are sitting on the fence. Now, the BJP chief ministers have to necessarily sit on the fence unless the boss tells them get off the fence. How long can the BJP chief ministers and finance ministers sit on the fence? They have to take a stand. They were given, I think, 7 days, which is expiring, I think, tomorrow or the day after. They have to take a stand. I hope that Mr. Sushil Modi and others will take the proper stand together with the other non-BJP finance ministers, and together tell the government, it's your business to borrow and lend it to us.
So, in the current political ecosystem, don't you think this is a bit idealistic to imagine that the BJP ruled state will not be asked, will not be given a line from the central party leadership that do this?
I mean, I'm surprised. No BJP government can borrow either. Can Mr. Nitish Kumar and Mr. Sushil Modi borrow on the market today? Obviously, they cannot. Haryana can't borrow. Which BJP government can borrow today? If they are silent or ambiguous, that is because they have not yet got instructions from the boss. Maybe they will get the instructions tonight or tomorrow morning.
You made a very interesting remark that it is the problem of imagination at the central government level when it comes to economic governance. Is it an imagination problem or it is a priority problem? Maybe in an alternate universe, economy is not an issue to them.
That's not correct. The economy will always be an issue. Even under the most prosperous times, economy is an issue. Because prosperity will bring its own problems. Distribution, more welfare measures. How do you apply the extra revenues? So it's not as though a prosperous country has no economic issues. Does not Japan or Germany or France, which are prosperous countries, have problems. China, the new rising economic power, has many, many problems. There will always be problems. Every government must understand that the economy is the foremost concern of the government. Financial stability is a foremost responsibility of the RBI. They have to work together to ensure that the economy keeps buzzing and booming even while financial stability is not compromised. If you push economy to the backbenches and bring forward Hindutva, bring forward citizenship, bring forward the idea of reducing states to union territories, it's completely warped priorities, completely misplaced priorities. The priority today is, and the priority at any given time for every government will be the economy.
Sir, thank you so much for your time. But again, I have one last question. 10%, minus 10% will be the GDP number for this year. That means the so-called recovery that we will see in quarter two, quarter three will not be a recovery. It will be a very big, deep hole. And there is no end of the light at the end of it. We can't see any light at the end of the tunnel.
See, this government peddles fake narratives. For example, if GST revenue in a month was 80,000 crore and next month it was 82,000 crore against a target of 1 lakh crore. When the government says in the previous month the shortfall was 20,000 crore, this month the shortfall is 18,000 crore, I see a green shoot of recovery. This is rubbish. If the first quarter is down 23.9 and the second quarter, let's assume, let's pray, is down only by 20%, does that mean a recovery? It doesn't mean a recovery. It means that you're sliding further down. A recovery is when you make up the 23.9 and register positive growth. That, I'm afraid, your viewers must brace themselves. That, I'm afraid, is not going to happen anytime soon. Read the RBI's report. It's not going to happen today, tomorrow, next quarter. In fact, I cannot see it happening in 2020-21 at all. If at all it happens, and even there is a doubt there, if at all it happens, it will be in 2021-22.
So 2 years of severe pain, actually.
Well, the last 2 years were man-made disasters. 2018-19 and 2019-20 were man-made disasters when in 8 successive quarters, GDP declined from a high of 8.2% to 4.1% or something like that. The pandemic struck us only beginning March. 2020-21 is natural disaster compounded by a man-made disaster. So 3 years of complete waste, 3 years of gross mismanagement has brought this country to its knees.
That reminds me, you are tracking infection curve and the mortality rate and all pandemic related data very closely. Do you see some date for peak out and flattening the curve and then end of lockdown and unlockdown?
Not at all. 6 weeks ago, I predicted by the end of August, we will cross 35 lakhs. We crossed it on the 30th of August. Now I predict by the end of September, we will touch 55 lakh infections. We will overtake Brazil in the next few days. Who knows, we may even overtake the US. If Trump is an example of gross mismanagement of the pandemic, what is Mr. Modi's claim? That I'm only next to Mr. Trump. Mr. Trump is the worst, I'm the second worst. Is that a kudo? Is that a laurel you can wear on your sleeve? That shows that the management of the pandemic, I don't blame the government for the pandemic. The management of the pandemic was completely wrong. Wrongly advised, wrongly guided, and wrong decisions were taken.
Sir, thank you again for your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much.